Welcome to everybody, and thank you for participating in the 2021 virtual R3 Forum. For those that don't know me, I am JD Strong, Director of Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation, coming to you from a remote hunting lodge in Northwest Oklahoma, no less, with little over 24 hours left to be able to pursue a turkey. So we can't just talk about hunting and shooting sports. We got to participate in it as well, right? So it's been my honor and pleasure to be chairman for the past couple of years of the council to advance hunting and shooting sports. And I think why it's important to me is because I think we just learn so much more as a community from each other when it comes to R3. R3 functions best when we leverage our partnerships and work together as an R3 community. And that is what the Council of Advanced Hunting and Shooting Sports is all about. And today's attendance is a testament to that end. We've got around 400 folks registered for this so far. Lots of folks continuing to pile on, and that's great. That's only going to help us to advance the R3 cause, both in my state and nationally. So great things happening at the council. I also want to stress the importance of R3 from my perspective as a director. I think too many times, especially early in the R3 years, folks would have assigned an R3 coordinator the job of handling all that R3 stuff, and then directors and everybody else could focus on other things. Well, I think everybody's awakened to the fact now that there aren't any other things worth focusing on more than R3, because at the end of the day, if we don't have hunters and shooters, we do not fund wildlife conservation in the United States, and we're all out of a job. So critically important that we have engagement and involvement at the highest levels, the director levels, that sort of thing. So do want to say I appreciate everybody's patience as we've had kind of fits and spurts of we're going to have an in-person R3 symposium, and now we're not going to have an R3 symposium. COVID has thrown a monkey wrench in a lot of folks' work, but we're very happy to be able to host this virtual symposium today. And I look forward to inviting all 400 plus of you and more to Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, that first week of May in 2022, where we do definitely plan to have an in-person R3 symposium and lots of fun while we're there in Broken Arrow. Dates and details will be announced later at the end of the meeting. And so we've got a lot of new faces at the council nowadays, if you haven't noticed. And from my perspective, kind of being involved in a lot of the turnover, changeovers, hiring decisions, I feel like we have assembled a stellar team at the council to advance hunting and shooting sports. And I think we have a really bright future. And I think we've got a team that will take us to the next level as we look at the next 10 years of the life of the council and what we can do to help leverage those partnerships and knowledge to help everybody in the community to really advance the ball of R3. And so we're going to kick that discussion off, starting with the new captain of the team, Dr. Stephen Leath, who we're very fortunate to have, and they're so grateful that he was interested in throwing in for the job. So thank you, Dr. Leath, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, JD, for your remarks, the intro, and really your long-term service to the council. We wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for you, John Frampton, and others that came before us. And we're looking forward to doing exactly what you said, and that is raising the bar and moving the council up and forward. And I'm a glass half full guy. I think the future for the council, and I think the future for hunting, shooting sports is very bright. We saw some of that with the surge in numbers during COVID, and we're going to have a discussion on that today. But we saw a surge in numbers in January and February before COVID really hit, and that's exciting to me. And it's a testament to all of you R3 devotees out there for what you've been doing in moving the bar forward over the last few years. ATA released their new numbers last week, and they're on a pace to double sales, excise tax in archery compared to last year. Truly tremendous. And it's good for all of us to see that type of interest and passion and commitment to this. I've seen some of that myself. I mentioned this to some folks yesterday, where more young people are coming to me as an experienced hunter asking if I would teach them how to hunt. And I've not seen the numbers in my personal life like that really in my whole career. So it's exciting to see this both on a national scale and a personal scale. I must say I've enjoyed my first 100 days here, and especially all the support from professionals in this field. This is a great community, and I'm really glad to be part of it. There has been a lot of change. Swanny is our long-term council employee as he closes in on 6 months. I started in January, and we have two new employees I'd like to introduce you to. The first one is Haley Faith. You're going to get to see her and hear her voice here in a minute. She's an avid outdoors person, a hunter, a fisher, archer. She started the first collegiate DU chapter in New Jersey when she was a student there. She started with us in April, and you'll see her regularly. She'll be handling a number of our R3 issues, R3 community, R3 clearinghouse, revitalizing our social media presence, and many other things we call on her for. So, Haley, I'm going to stop for a minute so you can say hello.
Thank you, Dr. Leath. I just want to give a warm welcome to everyone attending and just say how thankful I am to work for the council. It really is a dream come true to work for an organization whose mission aligns so perfectly with my passions. And I really look forward to the future with this organization, managing events, the R3 community. I'm really working to push the mission of the council into the future. So thank you. And it's nice to meet you all virtually.
Thank you, Haley. And our most recent addition, who's not even with us quite yet, but will be starting in a couple of weeks, is a woman who's familiar to many of you. Sanaya Bethke, who's the Education and R3 Coordinator for the state of South Dakota, rising star in the R3 community. Many of you that have worked with her told me so. We are thrilled to have her knowledge, experience, passion coming to the council, and she will still be a great partner for her home state. Sanaya, why don't you say hello in a new way to this group?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for those kind words, Steve. This is an incredible opportunity I've been given to join forces with the council and to help continue the relationships that are out in the field from a new level. We're looking at a pivotal time in R3 as we look ahead in conservation and all of the kind of national initiatives that we have a chance to take a part of. And I just can't wait to elevate and amplify those diverse voices on the landscape and push forward in R3. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Taya. Now, for the benefit of all of you on board, you may be thinking with this new group and new leadership, where are we going? What are we doing? And I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to talk about that and turn it over to Swanny. But we did have a business plan that was developed by the executive committee and the previous staff that was just completed in 2020. So what I'd like to do is next month get the staff and much of the executive committee together. It'll be the first time we've ever worked in one place, first time we've physically met each other in some situations, and really lay out an action plan that lays under the business plan so we can set priorities for what we're really going to do the next 2, 3, 4 years. We'll finalize priorities on communications, internal, external, our partnerships, mechanisms to diversify our sports, and really find out the best way to be partners to our existing state agencies where we've had long-standing great partnerships and broaden our partnerships and interaction with industry. This is all going to be based on the council's purpose, vision, and mission, which is on our website. We want to continue to be a great partner to our states and broaden our partnerships beyond that. And you'll see some of that broadening of partnerships today with some of our new partners participating in the meeting. We're super excited about that. But as we go forward, we need to be mindful of where we came from and how we got here and what really formed the council. So to that point, Swanny and I have talked, and Swanny's going to take over and talk a little bit about the history of the council from its formation to present and how we've evolved So it sets the stage for where we're going next. But I can promise you, as the new executive director, we're dedicated to our partners, dedicated to R3, and you should see great things from the council with this team over the next few years. So Swanny, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dr. Leath. As Dr. Leath mentioned, I am the manager of partnerships at the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports. And I am going to throw up a presentation really quick because I'm also our resident historian, being the longest standing employee here at 6 months, almost 6 months. And we're going to go through a quick organization update. And we want to start off with a little bit about the history of the council, where we came from, why it was started, and just a real quick bit about where we're headed. We don't have a lot of time, but we are always looking forward to talking to everybody. So if you have questions about where we're headed, what the council does, we're always happy to follow up with you in the future, and I'll list our contact info here at the end. So it all started in 2007. There was something that happened that year that nobody thought would ever happen. In fact, there were several people that said it's just not going to happen. And that was, I graduated high school. But also, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies had an industry agency summit in Washington, D.C. And this was the first earnest discussion about the need for the council. There was concern about hunting participation, shooting participation, the funding mechanisms for wildlife conservation, et cetera. And then in 2008, at the White House Conference on North American Wildlife Policy, a plan emerged. And that plan was titled Educating, Recruiting, and Retaining Hunters. One of the action items in that plan was to create a hunting and shooting foundation similar to the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation. And if you're not familiar with RBFF, they'll be presenting later today. They're a great partner of ours, and they work on R3 on the angling and boating side of the equation. So with that direction, in 2009, the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports was officially chartered. That's when the organization began, with the purpose of ensuring support for active participation in hunting and the shooting sports for future generations, a vision of an America where hunting and the shooting sports are an integral part of mainstream culture and where hunters or shooters are widely recognized as conservation contributors. And then, of course, our mission, which is to facilitate the promotion and growth of hunting and the shooting sports and the education of the public on the contributions that hunters and shooters make toward wildlife conservation. So we're going to go over a quick timeline really quick, just to hone in on some of the happenings as the council's progressed over the past 11 years, and then talk about where we're headed. We're not going to be able to hit everything, but I did want to throw this up here. This is straight out of our business plan that was formed a year or two ago. As you can see, in 2009, the bylaws were signed. The council was chartered. 2010, first board meeting, and then a CEO came on board a year later, and then a full-time staff person. It was kind of a slow roll there at the beginning. But things really started to pick up in 2015. The national R3 community, the online community, was established. If you're not familiar with it, this is an online platform that facilitates interaction between R3 professionals across the country. We share a lot of content on there. It has won awards in the past. We do webinars, et cetera, and a lot of professionals post and interact with ideas and strategies that they're working on in their states or organizations. I checked this morning, and we have 2,904 members on there currently, which is an incredible increase from years past. So the real question is, who's going to be 2,905? It's nationalr3plan.com, and I think we have a couple of people on here that are not members, so go in there, do a request to join, and Haley Faith will be happy to process that request for you. All right, then in late 2015, almost 2016, the first state R3 coordinator was hired. This was actually a recommendation that came out of the National Hunting and Shooting Sports Action Plan, even though it hadn't been officially released yet. And this was the first one under the direction of that plan. There were other positions already focusing on R3, but that's actually when I came on board as the R3 coordinator in Georgia. And since then, you can see this map that's on our website, cahss.org, where you can check out all of the R3 contacts in each state. So to date, the R3 has really been picked up and become thought of as a way that we do business, not just a program. And there's R3 professionals all across the country. And a lot of that spurred from the work that the council did. So with that, I already mentioned the National Hunting and Shooting Sports Action Plan, but this was the guiding document that the council worked on that defined the strategies for recruiting, retaining, and reactivating hunting and shooting participants. Looked at, provided kind of a guiding document for the whole community. Part of that was getting that individual a butt in the seat, if you will, to really work on this. And as states started to bring on positions or think about it and start to move forward with R3 and their agencies and organizations did the same, there were a lot of state R3 workshops, and the council facilitated many of those workshops. In fact, I believe they did over 20 across the country. Among other, of course, in addition to that, they did a lot of symposia, everything from the Wildlife Society meeting in Cleveland, where they put together an R3 symposium, to SHOT Show, where they were doing news conferences and press releases and everything else. So a lot of exposure for R3 came from things that the council helped facilitate. And then in 2018, the first and actually the only National R3 Symposium happened. It was supposed to happen again, but due to COVID, we're all here virtually. So this was in Lincoln, Nebraska. We all had a really good time. It was extremely productive, a lot of great feedback. We had over 300 people there from over, I think 100 different organizations were represented at that time. So we're looking forward to getting back in person, but that really helped continue to push R3 across the country and throughout organizations, agency, NGO, and industry. Now, as part of that National Hunting and Shooting Sports Action Plan, it really got the ball rolling with getting positions on the ground. But then there was some question about how do we further the implementation of this plan? And that's where the National R3 Implementation Work Group was born. So this was a group made up of experts across the country that worked on identifying strategic priorities and then developing products surrounding those. And one of the results of that was that some of the funds that came out of the Modernizing Pittman-Robertson Fund for Tomorrow Needs Act were dedicated directly to R3, and the strategies that we're going to hear about later from Savannah with AFWA that are required surrounding those, the strategic priorities, came directly from that National R3 Implementation Work Group. So they had a significant influence there and continue to today. We're moving forward with the next steps of that group, and we look forward to seeing where we're headed in the future. So there was a virtual R3 forum held in 2020, and we're doing another one right now. It's a quick timeline of where the council's been. Now, where are we headed? We've got new leadership, working under excellent leadership with Dr. Stephen Leath. He's a former president of Auburn University, Iowa, multiple leadership roles, very engaged and passionate about conservation and about hunting and the shooting sports. We've got new staff on board. I'm relatively new. Haley's coming in with some excellent experience in social media, managing various platforms, and Tanaya is another member of the implementation work group that's come in and is well respected in the R3 community. So we're really looking forward to getting rolling with this new team. We are going to continue to facilitate and provide all of the previous services that we did prior to having this new team on board. So we're not forgetting about anything or anybody, but we are going to increase emphasis as we've added capacity on a few areas. We're going to really engage some new partners and try to develop new partnerships, increase our marketing presence, and really focus on that vision where hunting and shooting sports are are something that's thought of as integral, and it's known to society as a whole that hunters and shooters are supporters of conservation. You're going to see a heavy emphasis on diversity. You know, we focused so long on increasing participant numbers, which we still will, but diversification of those participants is perhaps just as, if not more, important for the future of hunting and shooting sports, and ensuring that these activities are available to everybody and here to stay for the future. Training, we have a lot of new R3 staff coming on board, some turnover, a bunch of new people coming in that don't have R3 experience. We're going to start doing more training and scaffolded training. So for experienced professionals all the way down to the new R3 coordinator. And then we're going to place a lot more emphasis on research and data. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to the COVID cohort session. So with that, here's all of our emails. Feel free to reach out to any one of us at any time. Haley's going to be managing all of the R3 community stuff. So if you have any questions about that or their website, she's the one to go to. And we are going to turn it over to a project that we've been working on, a variety of projects and partnering on quite a few. And we are excited to introduce Dr. Joshua Millspaugh. He's the Boone and Crockett Professor of Wildlife Conservation at the University of Montana. And he's working on an effort that's near and dear to my heart, working on a lot of R3 college programs. College audiences are thought of as a ripe audience for R3. There's a lot of research to suggest that it makes a lot of sense, and theoretically they would be a very efficient audience to bring into hunting and or the shooting sports. And Josh has identified some issues surrounding bringing that audience in, and he's going to give us a rundown of what that looks like and what we can do about it, and we're going to help facilitate that in the future. Josh?
Wonderful. Thanks for that introduction, Swanny. I'll go ahead and I will share screen. I'm sorry, there appears to be a little background noise. They decided to just mow outside my office. So hopefully that'll go away here in the next minute or so. Talk about bad timing. Let me share my screen here though. And so I'm hoping, can you all see my presentation here?
We can. You were good to go, Josh.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today to talk with you about non-resident college student hunting licenses. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background and also what we've been doing here in the state of Montana. As many of you are aware, college students are emerging as a key population for hunter recruitment. Students are a receptive audience. We see they're interested in new experiences, and one of those is hunting. We also see an additive effect with students. Students often will recruit their peers to hunting. We also know that habits that are formed during college are often lifelong. So we see lifetime effects here. The last thing is, we also know that we have the potential to lose college-age students if they don't have an opportunity to hunt during those college years. So for all of these reasons, there are a whole host of programs that exist nationally at different institutions. There have been lots of conversations around college students and hunter recruitment. And the University of Montana is no different than other universities in that regard. We have a Learn to Hunt program that has become extremely popular with students from all over campus. Student groups have created their own mentorship programs to get their fellow classmates out in the field and hunting. Clubs including the Wildlife Society and BHA, those groups have been particularly active at our university with providing hunting opportunities for our students. And we even have a legacy scholarship available to our non-resident students so that they can purchase hunting licenses to get in the field. But what we've seen throughout the course of our work with college students is that license cost limits the full potential of these programs and is often a barrier for our non-resident students. One of the questions that often comes up is, well, if students are living full-time in a state, for 9 months as they're taking classes, why don't they just claim residency status and then the issue goes away? Well, as we unpack that with our students, we have identified there are a number of reasons why they're unable to do that. Often financially, there are scholarships that they have, and even income tax associated with their parents prohibits the opportunity for resident rate or resident status for these students. So let me show you what I mean specifically here in the state of Montana. Our students, the current statute provides our non-resident students with the opportunity to purchase non-resident rate licenses at half cost. So if we have a student who wants to hunt a white-tailed deer on public land just outside of Missoula, they're going to pay $338 for that opportunity. One of the things that we've done is we have been interested in this topic. We've completed a national review of which states provide these opportunities for students, for non-resident students. So what I'm showing you here are the 28 states in the country that do provide opportunities for non-resident students to purchase resident rate licenses. There are another 19 states that don't have any statutes addressing non-resident student hunters. And Montana is the only state that provides non-resident students with the opportunity to pay half that non-resident rate cost. So the other thing that we have discovered throughout the course of this review and looking at states and their individual statutes, we have identified a number of other barriers that we have collected. For example, at least one state requires that students live in a campus dormitory to qualify for those resident rate licenses. Some states also have age restrictions on who is eligible for those resident rate licenses. Some states have time residency requirements, which if you read those statutes becomes a barrier. If a student, for example, ends up leaving the state for the summer for a work opportunity, by the time they come back in the state, the clock starts again, and they're not eligible for those fall hunting licenses or at resident rates. Some states also have paperwork that could probably be viewed as onerous as well. And as we talk with individual states, some states will say that the enforcement of these regulations may vary, but we also still think it could preclude student participation if students are simply reading the regulations, wanting to be in compliance. They may not realize that the enforcement or some of these may be a bit squishy. And of course, especially with wildlife students, they don't want a game violation that could certainly upend their career in the field. So there are a number of these barriers as well that we've identified. Just in the last couple of minutes, I wanted to share with you the work that we're doing in Montana, and just wanted to start with a little bit of the legislative history here in the state, because we have a varied history with student hunting licenses. Prior to 2009, our non-resident students had to pay full non-resident license rates. In 2010, as a result of some legislation, non-resident students could purchase resident rate licenses. However, in 2016, as a result of a number of hunting license reforms, non-resident student licenses were set at that half non-resident license price. And then in 2018, there wasn't an accommodation. Instead of buying what was the big game combination, deer and elk together, there was an option to purchase those separately, again at half the non-resident rate cost. So what does this mean and how does it translate then? I want to show you the history and show you what happened here in Montana regarding student license sales. And so what you're seeing here, remember in 2010, students could purchase that resident rate sportsman's license for $70. We see that increased to nearly $500 by the year 2015. We saw that 700% increase in student license price from about $70 to nearly $500. We saw that 77% decline in student license sales, and we've continued ever since to see that number continue to decline, such that there are fewer than 100 students that are purchasing and taking advantage of that big game combination license. Well, as a result of all of the work we have been doing at the university to promote college student hunting, we worked over the last 8 months or so through a legislative process to go back to that non-resident students paying resident rates, just like 28 other states in the country. Student involvement was certainly key in this process. Students testified at House hearings, Senate hearings. There were other outreach activities, and one student in particular was critical in leading that effort and leading that charge. We also received additional support from the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. Ellery Tucker Williams in particular was extremely helpful, and the Boone and Crockett Club. As a result of all of the work over the last 8 months, I'm thrilled to say that the students and I will be at our state capitol tomorrow for a bill signing ceremony with the governor. And we will again allow non-resident students to pay resident rate licenses. So we're really excited about that. Looking ahead, my goal here today, I wanted to raise the profile of this issue more broadly. We have this receptive audience in students. We now have 21 states who don't provide opportunities for these non-resident students, and cost could potentially be a barrier. So just raising the potential for legislative change in those states, not providing those resident rate hunting and fishing licenses for our students. Also, we're in the process of writing this up and intend to publish this, but we also hope we'll better unpack in that paper some of the potential barriers that we have observed in different state statutes. The other thing is that there are student groups and others involved at different universities who are eager, certainly to hunt, but who are also willing to run a ground game to assist in this legislative process. And my hope is that there is a way that we can get those students active, certainly as it relates to this legislation, but it's also a wonderful lesson in legislative processes as well. So I'll leave on that note. We're certainly happy to share what's worked for us, documents, other information in any way that we could be helpful. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Certainly seems like something we could work on a little bit. Reducing complexity of regulation is always something we strive for, and reducing the barriers to entry, especially for college students, when we look at that time as being a time where lapse can occur, also a time when people are getting out from under their parents' thumb and they're willing to try new activities. So if you're in one of those 22 states and you think y'all might be interested in pursuing some either regulatory or legislative change that needs to happen, please feel free to reach out to Josh. Check out this Congressional Sportsman's article that Haley just dropped in the chat here. And I would do to consider reaching out to your regional representative for Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, because they do a lot of that on the ground work. And I think, Josh, that's what helped really get y'all through up there in Montana. So we're not going to do questions on the backside of this in the interest of time, because we want to save questions for the sessions that we have. And with that, we're going to start getting into the meat of the meeting here, starting with the COVID cohort session. Before we dive into it, do want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. This is always my favorite part of these virtual meetings. So I'm your tour guide for today. We're going to be walking you through it. Haley's our technology guru. She's going to be keeping us all straight and moving in the right direction. Once again, if you're a speaker that's just joining us, when your session comes up, you'll be added in from the attendee role. We are going to try to stay on time. We're already a little bit behind, but I'm going to catch us up because my presentation will be short in this session. This is all being recorded, including the chat. We're going to download that afterward to capture any links that any of you want to share in there. So don't type anything you wouldn't want your mother to see, because we are going to save it. Speaking of the chat, it's a great place to chat amongst yourselves, share links. It should be open for everybody to use. Somebody can test it out and make sure it's working. I think I allowed permissions there. But we are going to save questions in each session until the end. So for example, at the end of this session, we're going to bring the 4 presenters back on screen and do questions with everybody at one time. And if you have questions for the presenters, please put them in the Q&A box. Haley's going to monitor the chat, but I'm going to check the Q&A and go from there to ask the presenters the questions there at the end. All right. So I have one last thing to cover before we kick it off here. I do need to thank our planning committee. We brought together some experts in the R3 community to help pull ideas together to see what sessions and what kind of topics we should cover in this short half-day meeting that we were doing today in place of the National R3 Symposium. And that committee was made up of Josh Gold from Archery Trade Association, John Zinnel from Federal Ammunition, Joel Bryce from Delta Waterfowl, Hank Forrester from National Deer Association, Marsha Brownlee from National Wildlife Federation, Artemis, who we're going to hear from later, Jennifer Wisniewski from Tennessee, Tanaya Bethke, who at the time didn't know she was going to be joining us, but she's leaving South Dakota, but that's where she's currently employed, Jen Benedette from California, Ostry from Massachusetts, and of course, one of our community favorites, Doug Burt from Arizona Game and Fish, always one of the most enthusiastic people out there. With that said, we're going to go ahead and kick off the COVID cohort.